Thanks. Thank you very much for having me. I think maybe there's not that many folks that know about the American Bureau of Shipping, but it's not really a shipping company. So I'll give you a little bit of the history about what ABS is and isn't. What we see is the science challenges impacting shipping and the efforts underway to tackle those challenges, both in the way of government work as well as commercial activity. ABS was founded in 1862 as a non-for-profit independent third-party inspection arm of the U.S. maritime industry. As a class society, our mission, those almost sound like the Coast Guard, is to promote the security of life and property and to protect the natural environment. Today, more than 12,000 vessels totaling 220 million gross tons operate around the world under ABS class. ABS is authorized by more than 120 flag states around the world to work on their behalf on a matter of statutory certification. We primarily fulfill our mission through the development of our own standards and rules. We call them rules, for the design, construction, and maintenance of ships and offshore structures. Our rules build on over 150 years of experience and leverage both a robust internal research and development program, as well as real-world experience from our members. ABS, we've been involved in the Arctic and have quite a history in the Arctic. In fact, the first commercial vessel to ever cross the Northwest Passage, the SS Manhattan, was built in 1962, was ABS classed. Similarly, ABS was involved in the very first steel-cased Arctic drilling rigs deployed in the 1980s. Today, ABS operates its Harsh Environment Technology Center at Memorial University in Canada to help industry and governments assess the next generation of harsh environment technologies. So when the Admiral got up and he spoke about the challenges, he was thinking of those in terms of gross, large challenges. A lot of our challenges, we think in terms of the ships, the structures, and the people that have to operate on them. And that comes back to our mission, looking at protect the people, protect the property, protect the environment, to keep something from happening. We're not involved in response. We're involved in prevention. So a number of challenges that we believe impact the long-term viability and success of Arctic shipping include just the presence and the dynamic nature of the sea ice and the loads and what that mass really does to ships and structures. The low air temperatures and the ability to operate in that environment. Rapid changing weather conditions. You mentioned, how much do we know predictive in nature? How much can we let them know in advance so that they can prepare and avoid a casualty? The potential for ice accretion. Now, he was talking about basically a Teflon type coating, which we also are involved in supporting that technology and looking at those coatings. That's really in its embryonic stages, but that is where some of the future could be. And why is that important? Anybody seen the pictures of these ships that operate up there and how they're coated with ice, and fishing vessels that operate up in those environments already? That affects stability of the ship, the machinery's operation, all the equipment, and the people that have to operate in that environment, just the safety of on-deck activity. In fact, I was recently at a meeting with one of the new shipbuilders, and they're building fishing vessels now so that no one ever goes out on deck. So that if you catch fish, you don't have to be out on deck in some of the newer designs. Extended darkness or daylight. High latitudes, again, the Admiral spoke a little bit about the impact on communications and navigation. Incomplete and low fidelity hydrographic information, routes not thoroughly mapped and known. So really, Arctic shipping is in its infancy when we talk about safe navigation, whether or not it's in the northern sea route or in the Northwest Passage. Now, there has been success in recent years in that northern sea route around through Russia. And To aid operators in that region, ABS published an advisory for navigating the North Sea route, which provides guidance on seeking regulatory approval for operation in the region. It also helps operators identify potential risks associated with the region. And it leverages the ABS guide for vessels operating in low temperature environments, which address specific design, construction, and maintenance criteria for vessels engaged in Arctic shipping. Ships will fatigue over time. So when you build a ship, the idea isn't just to build for one trip. It's to build it for a sustained operation. Ice and the sea conditions in the Arctic are so much more demanding on ships and their structures. And so the maintenance and the actual measurement of loads that your vessel attains while it's operating in that region is critical to the long-term safety of that vessel and its crew and its cargo. And again, I think it's already mentioned before, just mariner experience. I mean, it's okay to have ships that are built, but again, you have to have experienced mariners and safe routes for them to be able to transit. Now, if you take away the northern sea route that Russia operates, that operates around Russia, and then you look at the Northwest Passage, that presents its own unique challenges. Those technical challenges include more severe ice conditions compared to the North Sea route, significant lack of infrastructure, no guaranteed icebreaker support, and rapidly changing weather conditions. Ships that operate up in the Northwest Passage have to be capable of independent operations. That means an ice-breaking hull form, high propulsion power, specialized equipment for the polar ice conditions. And what that does, and the reason that makes it difficult is because if you want to compete in the open water market, having all that equipment and all that specialty is a very large cost. You're putting all that into a vessel for a very short operating window when you think about it. In addition, the human factor, the crew performance in low temperature, and the lack of daylight has to be addressed for the ergonomics and the enclosed spaces and just the heating and emergency operations. Where does someone go in an egress situation if you have a problem in the Arctic? And that's true for offshore structures as well as ships. The offshore industry, in particular with their structures, one of the key challenges they have is ice management, this ice flow management. And that really is, how do you address how this ice is acting on your fixed structure or your semi-floating structure, depending upon your operation. And safe ice management means taking actions or assessing the risks so that you don't have a casualty. In other words, at what point do I assess that I'm going to surpass my safe operating envelope for this vessel or this platform? And therefore, I have to cease operations or I have to do something different and make those decisions. I think Eric spoke to the emergency. Basically, everyone now has to have the safety management system, the safety management approach. But the data is not there with as much fidelity as everyone would like. And there's a lot of efforts underway, and I'll talk to a couple of those. Efforts underway to tackle some of these challenges. There's an establishment of a polar code. The Coast Guard is actually, although Gary didn't mention, because he mentioned more the maritime domain awareness and the response side, the Coast Guard is also heavily involved in establishing technical standards, and as well as the marine industry, working with IMO. ABS is very much direct. We serve as a direct advisor to the Coast Guard at IMO for technical recommendations. And the Polar Code is a set of standards for both design and operation of ships. They're goal-based. This is one of the first goal-based standards that have come out, and it was, because it's goal-based and it's not prescriptive, a lot of times when you see standards for ships being built, they'll be very prescriptive what you need. In this case, for safe operations, they allowed them to be goal-based. The real challenge will be for class societies and countries to take that down the next level and be consistent in its application and consistent in its enforcement. Whereas the last thing you want is to have a vessel that shows up in a region and find out it's inherently unsafe because someone applied a goal-based standard instead of a true safe standard in its operation. So those are things that will have to be worked out in the future. With regard to government vessels, we see that coastal states will increase Arctic activity using government vessels, coast guards, and navies to demonstrate their sovereignty. You're already seeing it playing out. Russia is building icebreakers at unprecedented levels, dominantly to support their domestic activity. That's also why that Northern Sea route, what you had in 2009 through 13, you had quite a bit of activity. But in 2014, it was very much reduced. And we think, again, one, it was a shorter ice season, as well as the fact that the sanctions against Russia really didn't help them in any way. But Russia alone has had 6 active, has over 14 very capable icebreakers, multi-purpose salvage and rescue vessels, and they have the world's largest icebreakers. They have 6 active nuclear breakers with 2 under construction, 30 others, ranging from the Baltic and river icebreakers to Arctic icebreakers, 6 Arctic under construction, these 15 additional ships, including anchor handlers, OSVs, again, for offshore support activities. And technically, the Russian icebreakers meet the polar code, but they use their own standards. They have yet to adopt the international polar code. Again, I'm going to put a pitch in for the Coast Guard. Coast Guard needs to replenish and replace its icebreaker fleet. I mean, you just heard some of what Russia's done and is doing, both in terms to support research, but as Gary highlighted, in order to be able to respond up there and actively participate. And the Navy and the Coast Guard are also looking at taking their existing hulls and their ability to operate in the ice. In other words, they have existing vessels. The question is, are there any operations where those vessels can safely operate in marginal ice or in the shoulder of the summer seasons? For commercial vessel activity, Arctic oil and gas exploration and production projects will require new commercial assets. That includes icebreakers, support vessel, ice-class tankers, drilling rigs, and production platforms. All that is yet to come. ABS is currently involved in classification of the next generation of commercial icebreakers for Alaska. We classed the research vessels, the Kuliak, as mentioned earlier today, was ABS class and designed to the latest polar ice class strengthening rules. And we're involved in a leading joint industry project to establish and extend state-of-the-art modeling of ice loads on floating structures. The project includes exercising several available models and validation efforts and model tests on full-scale data sources. And again, this gets to that ice management piece that I spoke of before. So ABS has been involved in this since the first commercial vessel operated in the ice. We weren't there when the admiral's naval ships were operating up there, and we were just thinking about it. And we've been involved since the first rigs have been operating up there. And we see a continued effort in both supporting the government activities in the Arctic and support for safe ships and structures and safe operating environment for the people to be up there, as well as the commercial interests that are clearly there and the energy offshore interests that are there. So that's